in this live Q&A. Very, very excited. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Eleuterio Zamanillo. I'm a certified freediver and scuba diver living in Melbourne, and brand new to the YouTube community with a new channel called Dive Scout. Today, I'm super excited to be joined by two amazing sailors. First of all, Warren, who's behind the channel We Sail in YouTube, and he's a full-time sailor since 5 years ago, I believe, Warren, with his wife, Erica, and they've just been cruising around the world. And with my dad, Eleuterio Zamanillo, who's a 78-year-old man living in Mexico who has a lifelong dream of sailing halfway around the world from Mexico to Australia and is currently planning that trip to make it happen. Now, essentially the topic for today is preparing for your first offshore sailing trip. And we essentially hope that today brings you a lot of values. We're going to be talking about everyone's experience, but we want to bring you a lot of value on the lessons, surprises, things you need to know before you go so that you're well prepared and not have to find things out on the hard way. We're trying to tap into other people's experience and bringing that to you. So how is today going to, essentially today is a live Q&A, which means it's interactive. So the way today's going to play out is you send us your questions and we will answer them as we get them, essentially. So feel free to use the chat to send your questions through, and I will read them as they come along. So go ahead and type away. Now, if you have a question for a specific panelist, please say that in your question. So say, Warren, I want to know this. If it's a generic question, then just ask your generic question and we will fumble and find who is the best person to answer your questions. Now, I do want to flag, we have a third panelist who we are hoping joins us today. John from Ministry of Sailing, the Ministry of Sailing channel and sailing school in the US is also joining us. He is, however, offshore. Hello, Cornelia from Romania. He's, however, offshore. So as some of you may know, that's always tricky. And he flagged that he was having some connectivity issues. So if you see a random fourth person join us halfway through the panel, that's John. And we'll be very excited to have him join us. If you had any questions for John, still write them down in the chat. And what we'll do, in the case that he can't join us, we'll write them down, take them to him, and then respond appropriately and at a later time. So there's still that possibility. So while you are thinking of your questions and typing away, I want to give you a bit of background as to how today came about. But in fact, I'm actually going to let my dad's past self tell us a little bit about this. So give me 1 second while I figure out my screen sharing and play a little video for you.
Hi, I'm Eleuterio Zamanillo. I'm 78 years old and I have a dear dream of sailing half the world to visit my daughter in Australia. I'm in love with the sea and sailboats since I was very, very little. And I don't know whether this was an impulse, a genetic impulse, or it was an acquired desire, but I know that I have to do it before I can't do it tomorrow. The force that drives me to get into this adventure is the will to visit my daughter in Melbourne sailing. And my concern is that I have very little time ahead before my physical decay or other problems could avoid me or could impede me to achieve this dream. My first goal in this endeavor is to get a knee replacement. That's what hinders me for sailing and about doing anything else. It will take about 4 months to get operated and recover full mobility. I hope you can support me, and if you can't support me, at least help me with your advices and motivation.
So we launched that campaign about a month or a bit more ago, halfway through March. And we're right in the middle of it at the moment. And as part of that, by the way, here's the link in case you want to read more, learn more, etc. But as part of that, we started reaching out to the sailing community, asking for advice, questions, and really essentially what we're doing today, tapping into other people's experience to prepare for the upcoming trip. And two of those amazing people who we reached out and have kindly given us their time were John and Warren. So after having amazing chats and just like feeling so excited and validated and everything else that you want to add to those adjectives, what we started thinking is like, well, surely we aren't the only people with these questions. Surely there's more people out there in the community who are wanting to take on an offshore trip. Hi, Erica, lovely to see you. To an offshore sailing trip that maybe don't know exactly where to start or know where to start, but still have remaining questions and are like, who do I ask? Because I'm not kind of like embedded in the community. So if that's you, we thought, why not make this knowledge sharing public and just do it live with people from all around the world. So that's how we ended up here. So welcome. We hope that today is very, very useful. And I guess like while we get some questions coming through the live chat, maybe I want to start with you, Eleuterio. You have a dream of crossing the Pacific Ocean for your 80th birthday. I guess like what inspired you to take on this journey at this stage in your life? Essentially, like why this, why now?
Because it might be my last chance to sail a boat and to visit you by sailing. And it's a lifelong dream I wanted to fulfill it. And I know I'm still strong enough. I had the knowledge. I have to keep up learning and getting updated on our skills and the tools and all the instruments and the new devices that are currently in the sailing world. And that's why I have this chance or I have to forget it.
It's now or never, essentially.
That's it. It's now or never.
Now, you mentioned getting never too late to follow your dreams. Thank you so much for that. You mentioned that
Thanks,
you need to retrain yourself on the tools. How has technology changed since you learned how to sail? And because you learned how to sail like in the 60s, 70s, if I'm not far mistaken.
70s, beginning in the 70s, between 60s and 70s. Well, at that time,
before GPS and Starlink.
GPS and Starlink and predict wind, and we only had sextant, paper cards, paper cards, a compass, a good clock, a barometer, and a lot of will and adventure, and lust for adventure. That's what we did. We didn't even need a permit or a license to sail.
It was a wild, wild west then.
That has changed.
The wild, wild west.
Yeah. Wild, wild west, yes.
It's still kind of the wild, wild west out there. I will be honest.
What I know.
Which is good. We like that.
Yeah,
like
that. It's hard to stay at. Yeah.
Yeah. True freedom, really.
There's more concerns about safety and regulation, and yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, as there should be.
In that sense, that I guess like your how will your knowledge about technology before the technology that has now, how is that informing your approach to your trip?
Well, I know that I have to equip it with most of the new devices, especially those that make it easier to handle the sheets and the sails and the rudder, because I'm not so young, so my strength it's limited. So I have to be careful with that. and use whatever I have forced intelligently. I mean, do things smartly, not strongly. And that's why I think I have to adapt that boat to my conditions and be careful, very, very, very careful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think one of the things we've been talking about a lot over the last month or so is ensuring redundancies in systems. So you be too like it's better to have a lot of backup systems and not them than to need them and not have them. So as you say, like in the boat, and making sure you have like extra batteries and all the automations, you know, and 3 different types of like navigation systems on top of the manual ones that don't rely on satellite and things like that.
Yeah.
Now I'm seeing some
that's
comments
just good
coming through the
seamanship. I
chat.
think that's.
Keep going, Warren.
Yeah, Warren.
I was just saying, I think that it's just good seamanship today to have your boat as fully prepared as possible, have redundancy on all systems, and to be as prepared, for the eventualities that could occur out there. So yeah, I think that's really smart for anybody of any age, but yes, especially for you. Yeah.
Yeah, and refresh the sextant, the astronomical navigation, the celestial navigation, and all those old tricks.
Just in case.
Just in case. Just in case.
Yeah, it's a lost art, but an art nonetheless.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm seeing some comments coming through the chat. I'm seeing Barrett's health concern is one of my wife's biggest concerns. She's mostly healthy, but has some neuropathy. Yes, absolutely. Health is a concern. And I think in that sense, one of the things that you're doing is kind of like having a bit of a tiered approach where you're going to be doing some like coastal sailing first and kind of like sussing out your own, I guess, like capacity in that sense before like not going from 0 to 100.
Right. Essentially where the weaknesses are, where the gaps are, and then how to fill them and how to, cover those bases. That's smart.
Yeah. Now, Warren, I know that,
Yep.
How have you navigated like any health challenges? Because you've been full-time sailors for 5 years now. So I'm sure you have had some like issues come up during that time that have forced you to think on your feet.
Yeah, we have. Thankfully, knock on wood, nothing too serious as of yet. Although the reason my wife isn't here is because she tore her Achilles tendon. But luckily that wasn't on the boat or on passage or anything like that. It was dancing while she was in the BVIs. And so she's had surgery. So we have not had any health issues on the boat, but even us, and I'm in my 40s, she's in her 30s, health concerns are one of the biggest things to us, because once you take off from shore, I mean, you're a long way from help and a long, long way from doctors. Even when you get to the islands in the South Pacific, they're great and beautiful, but certainly not a lot of resources there. So I think anybody of any age, it should be pretty high on your priority list, is to, be set yourself with your body and your limitations. And then also while under passage, you have to really constantly think about one hand for you, one hand for the boat, making smart decisions. It kind of goes without saying, but no running. And just you just got to take it. You just have to operate a little bit differently mentally. That you just don't take risks, unnecessary risks. And I think that's about as far as you can go. That's about as far as we can take it.
Yeah, you can only do what you can do, but making sure that you're taking all the precautions necessary, I guess, and having like those plans in terms of what will I do if something goes wrong, and having clarity on what the plan is. Could go a long way for sure.
Obviously, we do have a very large first aid kit, so that's one of the things that that is one of the things that we do have. So all sailors probably do. I'm sure of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a defib and like all the emergency.
Oh, I wish. Yeah.
Absolutely. I see another comment in the chat saying, do you see that Amazon just launched satellites to compete with Starlink? Warren, do you have any comment on that?
I don't think they're the only ones that are competing with Starlink. I think that there's some pretty big names that are hoping to also do the same thing that Starlink is, and I think it's a sign of the times that today is the easiest day of our life, and you can say that every single day because every day, things are getting easier and easier and more accessible and more information at our fingertips. And, passages today are not what they were 5 years ago, and certainly not what they were 15 years ago or 30 years ago. And we're just going to see more and more of this. And also, we're talking to companies that are creating new chart plotters with insane information, and we're dealing with not only charts anymore, but now we're dealing with charts that are overlaid with satellite photos so that you can see exactly where you are, even if you're in a fog bank. And it's not just a depicted image, it's an actual photo of where you're at, and it's extremely helpful. So I think this is a fantastic thing. On the other hand, if today's sailor becomes too reliant on these systems and they go out, then I'm wondering if today's sailors aren't really as skilled. Actually, I know this for sure, that today's sailors aren't as skilled as the sailor of yesteryear, unfortunately.
It's like Google Maps, right? Like I find it stunning how before we used to remember how to go anywhere, and or at least you had to navigate the map and remember the map because you had to look at it and then go. And nowadays,
100%.
If one day we don't have Google Maps,
we will never find our way to the grocery store. No. We used to have our cities and our neighborhoods and and our roads all memorized. You just did. You had to, and on top of that, you could figure it out and dead reckon your way. But that's not happening anymore. So yeah, it's the ups and downs of technology.
So I guess that goes back to the redundancy in systems, because I think what you've raised, which is really important, is the technology keeps advancing more and more, and it gives us more accurate kind of representations of where we're at. But in that sense, we have heard stories when we were talking to John, actually, of he was using a particular GPS system, but they did the manual thing as a backup, and it was giving them 2 different readings.
Okay.
And he had he did it himself, and he was like, maybe I'm miscalculating. He asked another person in his crew to do it as well. And they got the same result that he did. So they decided to trust their manual calculations. And turns out they were right. And that the satellite system was slightly off. But slightly off can become very much off if you add some distance. So that triangulation, I think it could be the benefit that having all these different technologies competing could give us. Because then you have kind of if 3 different things tell you the same thing, you have validation rather than just relying on one. But you're right. There is something to be said about, even if you have those technologies at your disposal, to continue having the skills yourself and not be reliant on technology, which I think that's probably one of the strengths that you have from your days.
And there is one risk. If you rely only on the new devices, on GPS and all those automatic navigation systems, you may not learn how to sail. You may lost your knowledge. And if you trust too much those systems, you might find yourself on a reef.
Yes, absolutely.
Down under.
Yeah.
You become lazy. You don't do the things that you have to do.
Complacent, for sure. I definitely see this. It's very real. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, going back to the topic of health, I saw a couple of questions come up. So, Warren, what's the story behind international health insurance? Is that something that you have pursued as you travel around the world?
That is a very good question. We have not, and right now it's kind of biting us in the butt because we're having to pay for Erica's surgery out of pocket. So this is going to be very difficult to argue, and it's even hard to say because of what we're going through right now. But a couple of weeks ago, I would have told you that I stand behind not having insurance for us. This does not work for everybody, but we self-insured basically. Most of the areas that we're in have such good healthcare and are, much cheaper medical providers that because we were a lot of time in Mexico, and we could afford going and doing anything we needed. And we'd be in trouble if one of us got cancer or something like that. But we have not carried insurance, and I do think that probably is going to change now that Erica has gone through this and found it so frustrating, and this has kind of bit us in the butt. So it's difficult to navigate because a lot of the insurance, their job is to not pay out. That's how they make money, So I don't know how it works internationally. That's probably part of the reason why we have not gotten insurance, is because we weren't really sure how to navigate international health. Now, we do carry divers insurance. It's called DAN insurance, if anybody's heard of it. This is for emergency extraction, and they cover a lot, and it's very affordable. And it's a dive insurance, but you can carry it, and even if you're not diving, and you got to look into it. But there is a policy that they have that we carry. We also take very good care of ourselves, and we work out on the boat. We stay stretched. So that's our plan, basically.
That's a good plan. And I guess like you only learn through experience, right?
Yeah, we're learning.
So it's absolutely. It's a trial and error thing. But I know what you mean in terms of like the insurance, and I think that's true for when you look back and you're like, well, I've been paying car insurance for like decades and have never used anything. It makes you question it. But then the day you need it, it's like, oh.
Yeah.
DAN insurance sounds really useful, though. Really, really good tip, especially for the divers.
Yeah, DAN insurance. Yeah, look into that. Yeah, it's really important for divers.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, going back to kind of like taking a step back, I guess, from the specifics. 5 years ago, you kind of like get based and, settled to a full-time life at sea. What made you and Erica take that leap?
Boy, that's a loaded question. I will try to not take forever to tell the story, but it revolves around drinking margaritas on the beach in Mexico over a Christmas break that Eric and I took, and we were sitting in a hammock middle of the day, as one does in Mexico, and there was this beautiful sailboat kind of like, out on the ocean, sailing by, and I had long time held on to this thought that I was going to retire on a sailboat. That was kind of my dream. And Erica had gotten to do a lot of traveling prior to us getting together, and I had not. I had done some, but not a whole lot, and I really wanted to travel more internationally. And I owned a construction company that I had a lot of trouble but taking vacations from. I could never fully disconnect. And that was the very beginning of the dream. I asked her if she would be interested in something like that, and she said unequivocally yes. And I, okay, well, and that was over Christmas break. And by the spring, we were going to the Miami Boat Show and starting to kind of dream about what boat we would get. And within the next 2 years, we had sold everything that we owned. We had refinanced the house to be able to pay for the boat, and we had rented out our home that we had rebuilt. And so we were living off of the income from the rental on the home. And we had bought a boat and sold everything and took off. And that's the short story of a very long journey, but one that was well worth it. It was about 6 years ago, coming up on 7, actually.
Yeah, wow. Time flies, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's been 6.5 years.
Like in terms of preparation, like, and I think you already mentioned it, but would you say like it took you about 2 years to fully transition from like one lifestyle to the other?
Yeah, it was right at 2 years. Took from conception to implementation. It was it was 2 years to get everything wrapped up, rent the house, sell everything, buy the boat, find the boat, and then buy the boat. And 2 years.
What in terms of finding the boat and getting the boat and all of that, like, do you have any tips and tricks or like lessons learned?
Be really cautious on using a boat broker. They are glorified used car salesmen, and if anybody's listening that is a boat broker, my apologies. Nothing personal. It was just been our experience a few times. Get a good survey. Find a good surveyor, because not all surveyors are good. So those are my 2 tips and tricks. Be very cautious with the boat broker that you're using. They just want to get paid, most of them. And the second thing is have a really good boat inspection. And I say this we never had the first boat that we bought and this boat that we're on, we didn't have a boat inspection done. I did it myself. And that was fine because I'm very good at this stuff, but I've seen a lot of boat inspections go south because the guys are checking the life jackets and they're checking for things, and it didn't have much to do with the actual health of the boat. Mm-hmm. So those are my 2 tips.
Very important tips and tricks, though.
Yeah, I think so.
I think sometimes it's easy to just like get overwhelmed by all the things that you have to do, especially with something so big, and it's always the details that get you ultimately.
Oh yeah, this is true.
So knowing to look out for those details. Yeah, absolutely. Devil's in the details for sure.
Yeah.
Now, just for those of you who have been joining in after we started, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Essentially, today what we're doing is just a live Q&A. So we're taking questions as they come in. So if you have any questions around preparing your first sailing trip, or even if it's not your first, if you have any questions that you think would be useful as you prepare to go offshore, feel free to pop them in the chat and we'll just answer them as they come through. There's no like set structure to the day, so feel free to just chat up and we'll include you in the conversation. I guess like going back to you.
I have a question, Warren.
Okay.
How many miles? How many miles had you sailed before buying your boat?
10.
10 miles.
Maybe less.
Wow. Wow.
That's not quite true. This is the only experience that we have on sailboats prior to buying our sailboat. When I was in college in San Francisco, just south of San Francisco in Santa Cruz, I went out with a local sailor. He was actually a professor at the college, but he had a sailboat, a very small 23 or 27 foot sailboat that he took me out sailing because he just wanted to fish. So he gladly showed me the basics of sailing so that he could fish while I sailed his boat in a very controlled environment. So I knew the very basics. I knew what the mainsail was and I knew what the head sail was. And then my next experience was actually in Mexico when we went out on a local guy's sailboat where he took us to a couple different surf breaks. And that was where the actual idea got that, hey, you can do this. And so I liked that experience. And then after Eric and I started thinking about doing this trip, we chartered a catamaran in Croatia with some of our good friends. And we spent a week traveling around Croatia on the sailboat. And we got the sails up every day, but we had very, very low winds. So we didn't really ever get to sail it. We mostly just motored around with the sails up, just flopping back and forth. So we really didn't have any experience. We didn't do any courses. We did a lot of YouTube courses, so to speak. Yeah.
So I guess like after that, the excuse of like, oh, but I don't have enough experience. It's not an excuse, is it? Like,
no.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, where there's a will, there's a way. And the important thing is that it doesn't matter if you're learning to fly or learning to drive a car or learning to do anything. You don't just go into, surgeons don't just go into surgery after reading a manual. It's very little incremental steps. And you can do that a multiple different ways. Taking courses is one way of doing it. If you buy your own boat and you go out on day sails with people that know what they're doing, and that's essentially what we did. Was we had enough knowledge that we could safely navigate the yacht in and out of anchorages and raise the sails. And then we just, we spent almost 2 months in the same island when we first bought the boat, just going out on day sails. And then we did our first island hop, which was 20 miles, and then we did the next one, which was 30 miles. And so it was just an incremental, learning. And we made mistakes. We ran aground slowly. We wrapped, lines up in the prop. We, all sorts of things, all the mistakes that everybody's going to make. But they were little learning mistakes. They were stuff that we could survive and afford, and, nothing too crucial.
Yeah, having I think manageable goals is probably the key to it.
Yes.
Don't try to bite off more than you can chew. Now I see 4 questions have come through since we had started talking about this. So the first one, and this is for both of you: if money wasn't an issue, what would be your dream production catamaran? So not a custom built. Dad, I might go with you first. If you have ideas, if not, Warren, feel free to jump in.
Well, I will not buy a catamaran. I will buy just
a monohull,
a normal boat, a monohull. Yeah. I don't like catamarans because it's hard to reach to the wind.
It is,
and I know they are very comfortable, but they have also their own issues. I do prefer a monohull.
Okay.
And it will be if money wasn't a problem, we'll buy an Oyster 57 or something like that, or perhaps,
I knew it.
A contest.
Why did you know it? I'm interested.
The oysters are the oysters are fantastic. Yeah, they're the creme de la creme. They're a fantastic monohull. And if I was going to own, if money wasn't an issue and I was going to own a monohull, it would probably be an Oyster or an Expedition aluminum, like a Garcia. I love the Garcias. They're very tough as far as a monohull. And if it was a cat and money wasn't an issue, I love the HHs, and I love I like the Outremer's are very strong, tough, capable boats. And the larger ones are quite comfortable. And I guess it would be probably a balance, an HH or an Outremer. They're all outside of my price range, but if money was an issue, that's what it would be.
Awesome. Now, I'm staying on the cat topic. Would you recommend taking a cat docking class?
The docking can be very challenging. It was probably one of the most challenging things, because in my opinion and in my experience, most of the stuff that you're learning in the beginning, it's mostly pretty forgiving. If you haven't reefed in time, unless you're getting hit with a water spout, or a hurricane, you're probably not going to flip the boat or rip the sails. Everything is more forgiving, except the docking. There's very little forgiving if you've come in too hot or you're really making big mistakes with docking. So I would say if you're going to take a class, that would probably be one of the first ones I would take.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Other question coming in: was it a problem getting insurance without a captain's license? Going back to regulations.
Yes, there is
in my experience, there is a problem.
There isn't?
No, I don't think so. We've carried insurance off and on. Look at my hair; I'm a mess. I'm sorry. We do not currently carry insurance on the boat, but we carry insurance to go into marinas, which you absolutely do not need to have a captain's license for. And the 2 times that we have carried full insurance on the boat, we have not, because we don't have captain's licenses. So, they're very willing to take your money. So.
Yeah, interesting. So there's regulation, but it's optional, I guess, in that sense, which still makes it easy. I can see
That's
a comment
good tip for me.
Yeah, because you had a long list of certs that you thought you needed to get. So we're going over that list again to see if all of them are necessary. Now, I can see a comment from William. If he could buy a 2025 production catamaran, it would be a Windallow 54. He likes what they're doing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, those are nice.
And Warren, you had 2 Fountain Pajots.
Yes. Yep.
What were your thoughts on those?
Oh, love them. The big 3 production catamarans are going to be the Lagoons, the Leopards, and the Fontaine Pajots. Those 3 dominate the market in the production, and they're all roughly around the same amount of money. The other one that's big is Bali. I guess Nautique maybe are playing in the field, but those are the 3 big ones. Bali makes a lot of boats, but they are all geared for charter. Don't buy a Bali. Everybody, don't buy a Bali. Sorry, Bali, but they're not blue water cruisers. That's all there is to it. Lagoon has its share of problems, and I've never liked them. Leopard are very fantastic boats, in my opinion. I think they're tough, capable boats. Personally, I just love the Fontaine Pajots. I love the way they look. I love the way they feel. They're solid, capable blue water boats. Yeah. And I've loved both of our boats, and I stand behind them, and not because we have any affiliation to the company, because we don't. They pay us no attention, despite our channel and our best efforts. I wish that they did give us more attention, actually, but I still love their boats.
That's awesome. That's great to know. Yeah. Dad, if you didn't have an Osprey, what would be your second and third option in terms of boats? What other boats do you like?
I didn't understand your question.
Oh, if it wasn't an Osprey, like your first choice, what would be your second and third boat options? What other boats do you like?
I guess a Contest 49.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Contessa's great boats.
That's awesome. Any third one?
I 49. Well, I know how Contests are built. I use it. They're awful too expensive, and they're very good boats. Not very fast, but they are good boats.
That's very fair. Now I see an unrelated question. How hard is it to get mail when you're sailing around the world?
It depends on the area. Right now I'm in New Zealand, and it is quite easy to get mail. Mail is very easy. If we're talking about envelopes, it's very easy. If you're talking about packages like boat parts, it can be very difficult. The easiest way is to have friends that want to come visit you on the boat, and then that works fantastic. And we have never had a visitor who did not come with a suitcase full of boat parts for us. So that's how we have navigated 99% of the stuff that we needed for the boat came with friends that visited us. There's a lot of other people who don't have as many visitors who really struggle getting things they need. It's one of the main challenges for sailors these days. I remember even in the Caribbean, while it was certainly easier, it still can be quite challenging to find exactly what you need. And and once you leave the Caribbean, it just gets harder and harder. And certainly when you leave Mexico, when you get to the South Pacific, I hope you have everything you need on the boat, because getting it in French Polynesia is tough. And if you do get it, it's going to be very expensive. So, yeah.
The power of networks.
Yeah, I know you have to get a lot of spare parts. You almost have to have a spare part for everything.
I tell you what, it's funny, because I've been doing so much work on the boat, I'm tearing into all of the bilges and all of our storage areas, and I'm pulling everything out, either for access or because I need to get to it, whatever. And I'm looking at all of my spare parts, and I'm just kind of laughing, because I have a spare alternator, a spare starter, I have a spare pump for everything. I have a spare, I have everything but a toilet and a sink. You know, I have spare parts for all the toilets. I have spares for literally just about everything on the boat. And again, I think that comes down to just good seamanship, is having your boat as prepared as possible. It's not just knowing the weather and the wind and the seas. It's also really having a solid boat that is going to stand up against the harsh conditions and everything that's going to get thrown at her.
Yeah, that's very, very fair. I see a question coming
now
from...
with the Dyneema, and now with the Dyneema ropes, and you may even have those as a stay at the...
Oh yeah.
Well, as a replacement for your running for your
rigging.
Your rigging.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I see a question coming in from Dax. Do you have any regrets about how you executed your transition to cruising from land life? Anything you would have done differently, Warren?
Hi Dax. How you doing, buddy? I don't think that there was really anything we would do differently. I mean, I don't regret not taking a sailing course. I don't regret not working on a captain's license or having insurance. Like we don't really have any regrets. Everything kind of worked out as we'd hoped. I will acknowledge that certainly a portion of that is luck. But also, as I mentioned before, we bit off what we could chew. We really didn't go about it very haphazardly. It was pretty well executed plan and learning process, and we knew we were going to make mistakes, but we also knew our limitations. So we often stayed within, an acceptable step within our bounds. So the only thing I really remember struggling with was getting our belongings to the boat, and then navigating customs. But that's all part of the learning experience. There's no way that I could have foreseen any of those issues, and it was just part of the experience. It's like we laugh about it now that we were living with half of the stuff for our boat. We couldn't raise the mainsail because parts for our mainsail were in customs. We didn't have any, a third of our clothes and everything. So there was a lot missing, but again, part of our story.
They say that comedy is tragedy plus time, which I find is very, very true. I see a comment from, Bill. Warren, who gave you that list of spare parts? And when are you going for a visit? I'm assuming Bill might have given you some of those spare parts.
He did not, but he's a great guy in Hawaii that we met, and we stayed with him and his lovely wife at their property on the Big Island. So hi, Bill. Good to hear from you, buddy. Nobody really gave me that list of spare parts. What I did is I just started listening to a lot of the other sailors around the anchorages and figuring out what went wrong, and then also realizing over time what is a critical system of the boat and what would happen if it went down. And then I started putting into play, a protection against losing those systems. So, let's say the motor, I would consider a crucial system of the boat. So what could go out on it? Fuel pumps, filters, the starter, alternators, these are all crucial things. Okay, well, my answer is then let's get one of those on the boat as a backup.
Yeah, I was going to ask, that was my follow-up question. Now, based on your experience, what are the parts that you most definitely need? Like, what's your top 5 or top 10 list of spare parts?
Well, let's go. The top 5 would be a water maker. Power on the boat is pretty important because everything that we use, the refrigeration and the water maker, relies on power. So having a very good solar array is particularly important to me because I almost refuse to run the motors unless absolutely needed, and same with the generator. So having a good solar array, a good battery bank is really important. And then the alternative is if we have to, because of really poor weather where we're not making solar, would be the motors would also be very critical. So everything to keep those motors in good running order, I would say that's a critical system. And so having everything in place for there. And then the lastly would be the generator. But ultimately, if the generator went down, the motors would then I still have 2 motors that could do everything that the generator does, just not quite as well. It doesn't charge the batteries quite as quickly. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good list. I think that's the main things right there. Everything else could probably be dealt with.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Warren. I've got a question for both of you. Would you consider going around the world on a motorboat, say like maybe a Nordham? Let's talk sail versus power.
Nordhaven.
That one. Thank you.
Yep.
No, I haven't.
My dad wouldn't.
No.
I don't.
No.
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 Tell us more about
I agree.
this. Why? What is it about sailing that's definitely like way better than
Because you look, in my case, you lose the contact. I mean, one of the reasons I like sailing is because I get in such a mood that without thinking, I know how the wind is behaving, how the tides are
Yes.
going, how the currents are interweaving, how the waves are evolving, how the clouds and the weather is coming, and you get a special state of mind that you become one with all of that. Without thinking, you are conscious of what's going on around. If you are in a motorboat, it's harder. It's harder to do it.
I agree. I completely agree. There is a beauty in sailing that does not exist in a motorboat. And I love the 71%. I love you guys. No shame whatsoever. The most important thing is getting out there and breaking free and experiencing the world and the ocean. And that's great. So my hats are off to anybody that does it anyway. But for me, two things. There's a beauty in sailing that does not exist in motorboats. There's no arguing that. There's a beauty in monohulls that doesn't exist in catamarans. So, I can admit that as well. The other thing for me that is very important, and almost paramount importance, is one of the reasons that this was so attractive to me was that I wanted to have a smaller carbon footprint. I wanted to live greener. I disagree with the way that the human race is operating on the planet, and I think it's wasteful, and I think it's I don't like it. So something about being able to, we for several years now, since Mexico actually, challenged ourselves to use 1 tank of fuel per year, and we have a 125-gallon fuel tank on the boat, and we don't even use a full tank each year. So since crossing the Panama Canal, in that year, I think we used 6 or 7 tanks of fuel. We went down, we just made a commitment to sailing, and we became much better sailors because of it. And so that's very important to me. But I'm not projecting that importance on anybody else. And again, I think anybody that gets out there, any means possible, is awesome. It just doesn't work for me.
Thank you so much for both of your answers. Question from William. What was your best surprise anchorage? Somewhere where you were not expecting to be as brilliant as it was. And your worst?
Lou, do you want to go first?
Well, my surprise anchorage was Ibiza. We didn't think we would reach there.
Bad.
Well, it was a good one because it was a good one because we got a squall in the way, and that was in 1970, 71. That's a long time ago.
Oh yeah.
We were sailing from Palma de Mallorca to Ibiza, and I was with a Czechoslovakian couple, and they rented a sailboat to go from Las Palmas to Ibiza, and the captain didn't want to go, so he sent us with a sailor. So we went there, and we got in the squall. This couple got scared. I was telling the sailor, "Hey, we are going to have a squall. It's coming on." No, it won't happen. It always comes close, but never happen. No, we did get into the squall. And we have a strong wind. I guess it was 30, 35 knots. Not many waves because it was flat from the wind, but a lot of rain. You couldn't see anything 50 yards away. So we pulled down the mainsail, and we asked the couple, the guy, the Czechoslovakian guy, to pull the sail down, but he forgot to get the halyard. He let it loose. So the halyard went up to the mast. So the squall went to the seas rose, the waves rose, and we found out that the halyard was up there. I had to go up to the mast to reach for the halyard to take it down. We set up the mainsail, but then the sailor didn't watch the compass. So during that time, we didn't know in what direction we were going. But I did see and I did watch where was our bearing. So when we arrived to Ibiza, I found it very, very comforting and happy to be there.
Yeah, I bet.
But I guess that in that sense, do you feel that the experience at least built your confidence in terms of being like, oh, I was able to manage? Because that was very early on in your journey. Like you hadn't been in those sort of conditions before, from what you told me.
Yeah, at that time I had quite that experience. I learned to sail in Neuchâtel in Switzerland. And I used to sail on a starboat alone in Lake Zurich. So I learned how to sail with storms and how to deck on deck without the engine because they don't have an engine. So I was quite confident in sailing. So for me, it was not big difference to sail a starboat than to sail I think it was an arpège from Dufour. And it was at 27, 28 feet sailboat. So it was not that big.
Yeah.
So I got more confident because of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about you, Warren? Best and worst experiences?
The best is going to be very difficult because we've had some really amazing surprise places. I'll just list a few of them. Just before passing the Panama Canal, technically still in the Caribbean, off of the coast of Panama, is some islands called Sandblast, and the Sandblast Islands were amazing. They were some of the most beautiful islands I've ever seen in the Caribbean. The next would be, there were several picturesque anchorages in the Sea of Cortez that were that place really surprised us. We ended up there for 2 years and we loved it. Obviously the Tuamotus and all through the South Pacific, but I would say that the number one best anchorage that we ended up at that was kind of like a surprise would be an island technically in the Cooks or near the Cook Islands, but it's owned by New Zealand, I believe, is called Niue. Nuie.
Niue.
And it is a very interesting. There's only one anchorage on the island because it's just one alone island that is looks kind of like a plateau. It doesn't really have an anchorage per se. They've put in 20 or 30 mooring balls that are a couple hundred feet deep, and you hook up to these mooring balls, and the island is amazing diving, amazingly clear water, in the middle of nowhere, friendly people. It's fantastic. And the worst, there's two that stick out. One was in Mexico because of a nudist who was super, and I don't mind people being nude on their boat, but we were in a small, tight little anchorage, and he was super offensive with his behavior and his nudity, and it kind of ruined the whole anchorage, unfortunately. And I know he actually was kicked out of town and had to relocate to this specific anchorage because of his lewd behavior. So that was bad, and that was a big surprise. And then the worst as far as anchorages go was just about a year ago when we were in American Samoa. They're very tight on their cruising, and it's notoriously bad. It's mud. There's a bunch of junk on the bottom, so you're either going to be dragging or you're going to hook up to an old mast or an old car or bicycle or something. It was the worst, and then also it was very rainy. It was very windy. We were not comfortable there. It was definitely the worst anchorage.
Wow, fair enough.
Yeah.
And customs is very, 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 very difficult.
Yes. Yep. It's notoriously bad.
I've got a question from Caden. How much saving did you have before purchasing your first boat? How much would you recommend budgeting each month while sailing?
That's a really important question, and it's going to vary from couple to couple. I would say, we lived on our first boat, which was also in good shape. It was a 2014 and we bought it in 2018. So it was only 4 years old. So it had the kinks worked out, but it wasn't old enough that things were falling apart yet. So we didn't really have to put much into it. And it was well maintained. So that helped. But we were living on just around $2,000 a month, which is, I would consider that the bare minimum. Anything that we needed to do to the boat, we had to dip into savings because we certainly weren't saving any money. And as time went on and we started making money on YouTube, that afforded us a little bit more comfort where we could, if we got to an island, maybe we'd go out to dinner a few nights. Maybe we could rent a car and drive around the island or go do a tour. And it's just gotten better and better. But we started out with, I don't know, $20,000 in savings, and we were living on $2,000 a month. Now we live on about $3,500 to $4,000 a month, so it's almost doubled. Is what we do, and there are some months that we're in isolated anchorages and islands that we don't spend hardly a thing, but then we'll spend a month in a place like Tahiti or 6 months in a place like New Zealand, and we'll spend through all of the money that we saved. Refitting the boat and going out to dinner and getting rental cars and whatnot, all the expensive stuff. So it fluctuates, but loosely that's what we spend.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that.
And I know that I know that you skip marinas because they are too expensive.
Yeah, that's another thing too. Is that there's a caveat. We are really aggressive with our sailing, so we don't spend much on fuel, which is big. We hardly ever go in a marina, which is a big savings. We're on anchor or on a ball all of the time, and we prefer an anchor, which is free. Anchorages are free. So we live pretty frugally. And so again, it's up to the sailor. If you're more comfortable motoring than you are sailing, and you're more comfortable in a marina than you would be at anchor, your spending is going to be quite different than ours.
Yeah, so I guess everybody's different, and everybody will need to do their own budgeting, but it's at least good to have a bit of a benchmark to know, like, all right, I'm a bit, I would like this extra, so I know it's going to be more than this or less than that.
Sure. Exactly.
Well, look, we're closing. We're nearing the end of our live stream. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. If you weren't here at the beginning, the reason why we're doing this live stream is for a good cause. We're crowdfunding so that my dad, Lute, who you heard of today, can get a knee replacement. So I've just posted the link in the chat. If you liked today's content and found something of value, please consider donating. We've got 2 weeks left, and we're still 31% away from our goal. So really, any help counts. Thank you so much to Warren for gifting us his time and energy. Please, if you don't yet, consider following We Sail, who I'm also pasting the link to their channel on the chat.
Thank you. More importantly is giving to Lute and getting him that knee so he can see this dream through.
Thank you, Warren. Thank you.
And I can visit you wherever you are.
Please, yeah. I want to share an anchorage with you. I want to share an anchorage in a sundowner.
That would be fantastic. Yeah. I'm also pasting my dad's YouTube channel, which just one. I'm also pasting my dad's YouTube channel, which right now has no content, but that's where we hope to, like, once he starts on his trip, which we're hoping for the beginning of next year. That's where you'll be able to follow his travels. Mine, which I am not a sailor, but I'm a scuba diver and a free diver, and I just launched a YouTube channel, and I'll be posting content on underwater adventures. So if you're into diving, consider following me as well. Thank you so much for joining, all of you, and looking forward to seeing you at the next time.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Warren.
Thank you guys all for tuning in.
Thank you, everybody.
If I didn't get to say hi to anybody, but hello to you. I've read all the comments, so thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye, guys.